In 2018, the peaceful town of Rosario was overtaken by an unsettling silence as news circulated about the disappearance of Alejandro Gutierrez. Recognized for his reliability and calm demeanor, Alejandro, who worked as a truck driver, disappeared without leaving any trace while traveling along one of his routine routes. His family and friends were confused. How could a man who never deviated from his routine simply disappear? Several days later, his truck was discovered abandoned in an isolated parking lot with the hazard lights still blinking. Inside, his personal belongings remained carefully arranged, as though someone had placed them in perfect order to prevent any suspicion from arising. However, the authorities believed that something far more sinister was hidden beneath this calm exterior. Clara Martinez was born and brought up in Rosario, Argentina. At 32, she had lived her entire life in the same neighborhood, encircled by gray streets and rows of houses that all looked alike. From an early age, this small-town life gave her a deep feeling of unease. As a child, she was quiet and obedient, performing well in school and keeping to herself. However, as she grew older, she became more and more restless, feeling confined by the predictability that surrounded her. She desired something beyond her job at the local pharmacy and the occasional get-togethers with friends. Clara encountered Alejandro Gutierrez when she was 28. He was 5 years older than her, a confident, tall man with tan skin and jet black hair. Alejandro worked as a truck driver, transporting goods across the country and spending extended periods on the road. They were introduced through a mutual friend, and at first there was no indication of a serious relationship. Yet Clara perceived in Alejandro a sense of calm and safety, which seemed like an escape from her relentless desire for change. Within a year, they were married, and their life fell into a steady routine. Due to Alejandro's long-standing experience and strong work ethic, he earned considerably more than many of his peers, and was able to save a substantial sum in his bank accounts. Every month, he moved a portion of his income into a dedicated savings account, envisioning the day when he and Clara could afford a bigger home. They often talked about their future plans: a roomy house in the countryside with a garden, and a comfortable living room where they could host friends and relax after long days. These dreams began to feel more achievable. Alejandro's savings kept increasing, and purchasing that home was no longer merely a distant fantasy, but a tangible goal within their grasp. However, this tranquil life soon grew suffocating for Clara. Alejandro was a man of strict routine. He always came home on time, never lingered out late, and refrained from involving himself in other people's matters. Their evenings were spent in silent television viewing or quiet companionship. The predictability that had once felt like security to Clara slowly turned into a source of annoyance. More and more Clara found herself alone in their apartment, particularly when Alejandro was away on another long-haul trip. She would become absorbed in her thoughts and daydreams, drifting further from reality with each passing day. Clara started looking for solace online, a space where she could discover everything she felt was absent in her life. She read accounts of people living double lives, became captivated by crime reports, and followed conversations about society's darker aspects. Her curiosity rapidly transformed into an obsession. She came across online communities where individuals openly shared hidden desires, elaborate plans, and fantasies about existing outside the law. These conversations enthralled her, pulling her in like a magnet. Meanwhile, Alejandro carried on with his everyday life, oblivious to the fact that his wife was descending further into a realm of fantasies that became darker and more vivid with each passing day. He remained as calm and reliable as ever, concentrating on maintaining stability for their family, never perceiving that Clara had started to inhabit a completely different world, one in which rules and order no longer held sway over her. The neighbors observed changes in Clara. She became more withdrawn, shunned conversation, and no one could fully comprehend what was occurring in her mind. But Clara realized she no longer wished to be the silent wife, awaiting her husband's return. She was seeking an escape, something that could shatter the endless routine and let her experience the excitement she had always longed for. That excitement in her mind resided in danger, in testing limits, in deeds that would unsettle others. Her fantasies began to move beyond the computer screen, and she found herself craving more. She envisioned what it would feel like to be with someone who ignored the rules. She yearned to experience the adrenaline she had read about in those stories, and she could no longer restrain herself. Clara Martinez started spending increasing amounts of time away from their home. She was frequently spotted in different areas of downtown Rosario, locations where it was simple to disappear into the crowd. According to the neighbors, she began appearing in bars and small gatherings, in hidden corners of town. No one knew her activities, but her frequent absence from home was becoming increasingly apparent. Alejandro Gutierrez carried on with his work as a truck driver. His job frequently required him to be away on extended trips, sometimes lasting several days. His routine consisted of early departures and late-night returns, a schedule to which he had become accustomed over the years. In late June, Alejandro embarked on another long-haul assignment, intending to return home in 3 days. It was a standard job, transporting a shipment from Rosario to Córdoba and back. Yet, on the evening he was expected to arrive, his truck never reached the driveway. He had also made no phone calls. Shortly afterward, Clara informed the authorities that her husband was missing. She stated that he had last called her the day before his scheduled return, and their conversation had been entirely normal. He had said that the delivery was complete and that he was returning home. When Alejandro Gutierrez failed to come back from his trip, his family immediately sensed that something was wrong. Known for his reliability, Alejandro always informed them if he would be delayed. In all his years of work, he had never gone missing. His mother, Maria Gutierrez, gripped her phone tightly, repeatedly dialing his number, hoping to hear his voice. Each unanswered ring, each failed call felt like torture. She prayed it was merely a signal problem, that he would eventually answer and assure her that everything was fine. But all that met them was silence. The police began an investigation, initially reaching out to Alejandro's employer to verify his route and trip schedule. The company confirmed that the delivery had been completed on time. Yet, no one had observed the driver on his way back. They examined the route, but discovered no evidence of accidents or any other incidents along the path. This lack of explanation fueled suspicion, and a task force was dispatched to Córdoba to investigate what might have occurred. Alejandro's family was distraught, cooperating with law enforcement day and night, calling hospitals and following the news for any updates. With each passing day, their hope diminished. Yet, they refused to accept the worst. Clara, Alejandro's wife, presented herself as a concerned spouse, striving to play the role of a worried partner. However, those who knew her well could not ignore peculiar details. Her demeanor remained unnaturally composed, and her answers to questions sounded practiced. Yet at that moment, no one could have guessed the part she might have been playing in the entire affair. 2 days after Alejandro disappeared, his truck was located. The vehicle had been left abandoned in an empty parking lot near a highway. There were no obvious signs of damage, but it seemed as if someone had intentionally left it there. Inside the cab, officers found Alejandro's personal belongings, including his phone and wallet. This appeared unusual. If it had been a robbery, the authorities would have expected money or documents to be missing. Yet, everything remained intact. The police also retrieved the truck's navigation device, which recorded his last route, a straight path from Cordoba to Rosario with no evident detours. The investigation soon concentrated on locating any witnesses who might have seen Alejandro's truck, or Alejandro himself, in the days before his disappearance. Officials carried out interviews, but no one remembered observing anything unusual. Meanwhile, Clara continued giving statements to the police. She depicted their life as peaceful and without conflict. Yet, certain aspects of her answers set off alarms for the investigators. Her composure was steady, almost overly confident, which they found unusual. It did not take long for the police to uncover that Clara had recently been spending considerable time online, interacting with unknown individuals on forums and social media, which further heightened their interest. Investigators began scrutinizing her phone records and internet activity. Several compelling details came to light. Notably, Clara had been exchanging messages with a user called El Lobo Negro just weeks prior to Alejandro's disappearance. These messages were encrypted and transmitted through a messaging app, mainly used for anonymous communication. This discovery became a turning point, prompting investigators to consider that Alejandro's disappearance might not have been accidental. The truck itself also raised puzzling questions. Although there were no indications of a struggle, forensic teams observed that the cab had been meticulously cleaned. This level of cleanliness seemed unusual for someone who had just finished a long trip. Even the most orderly drivers usually leave behind small traces, such as wrappers or empty water bottles. The cargo area remained untouched, as if no one had accessed it after the delivery. These observations led investigators to suspect that someone other than Alejandro may have been operating the truck on its final journey. A crucial lead emerged from surveillance footage near a portion of the highway where Alejandro's truck disappeared from view. The video depicted the vehicle turning onto a secluded dirt road that led to an abandoned farm. Police searched the site but found nothing. The location appeared to have been deserted for years, with no indications of recent activity. Yet the fact that the truck had veered off the highway aroused considerable suspicion. As the investigation advanced, doubts surrounding Clara intensified. Detectives continued examining her social connections, uncovering several individuals she had been in contact with, some of whom had criminal histories, adding new layers to her life beyond the home. Information about El Lobo Negro remained limited, but it was evident that this person knew more about Clara's intentions than anyone else. Up to that point, all efforts to locate Alejandro or determine what had happened to him had proven fruitless. The disappearance of his truck appeared more like a carefully planned act than a random occurrence. Every detail suggested that the case involved something far more serious than a simple missing persons investigation. Investigators began concentrating on theories involving criminal activity and were preparing to question Clara more intensively. Although they lacked definitive evidence of her direct involvement, the investigation into Alejandro Gutierrez's disappearance took a crucial turn. when detectives obtained cell tower data showing his phone moving along a route that diverged from his planned journey. The last signal was recorded in a location off the main highway on a deserted road seldom traveled by truckers. This discovery raised serious concerns and became a key lead for further investigation. Police organized a thorough search of the area, carefully examining the surrounding land. They soon discovered tire tracks matching Alejandro's truck model, which led them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. From the exterior, the building appeared to be a long vacant, empty structure. But investigators observed fresh tire marks and boot prints suggesting recent human presence. Inside the warehouse, officers uncovered grim evidence. They discovered a large red cloth on the floor, resembling a tarp stained with dark patches that appeared to be blood. Police collected it for analysis and also found several plastic containers emitting the odor of gasoline or a similar substance. These discoveries heightened suspicions that the location may have been used to plan or conceal a serious act. Forensic testing soon confirmed that the stains on the cloth were indeed blood, and it matched Alejandro's. This breakthrough escalated the urgency of the investigation and prompted detectives to consider the likelihood of a violent crime. Simultaneously, police began collecting witness statements, contacting Alejandro's friends and co-workers to reconstruct his final days before his disappearance. Meanwhile, detectives continued surveilling Clara's bank accounts and electronic devices. On one of her social media profiles, they discovered communications with a user named El Lobo Negro. Their exchanges were carefully phrased, yet fragments suggested more than a casual conversation. Some messages appeared encrypted, containing references to meetings and transactions that aroused suspicion. Investigators began to consider that Clara might be implicated in illicit activities. As they examined the messages more closely, it became evident that El Lobo Negro had knowledge of specific details about Alejandro's routines. In one exchange, he referenced a time and location that corresponded with Alejandro's last recorded trip. Police suspected that this was no mere coincidence and submitted formal requests to uncover the identity behind the alias. Meanwhile, the scrutiny on Clara increased. She continued to claim that she had no knowledge of her husband's whereabouts and was not involved in his disappearance. Her account remained consistent, but detectives detected subtle inconsistencies. During interrogations, they repeatedly returned to details she appeared determined to avoid. Clara preserved her composure, yet it became clear that her version of events did not match the facts investigators were uncovering. A few days later, the police received another unexpected lead. A witness who worked at a gas station near the location where Alejandro's truck had been found recalled seeing the vehicle shortly before it disappeared. He stated that a man was driving, but a woman was seated beside him, matching description. This testimony marked a significant turning point in the investigation, suggesting that Clara might have been in the truck that night. Investigators shifted their focus to the financial records of the Gutierrez family. They soon discovered a pattern of unusual transactions. In the months preceding Alejandro's disappearance, Clara had transferred substantial sums to accounts registered under fictitious names. These funds were subsequently moved into anonymous wallets, making them difficult to trace. This method is commonly employed to hide illicit income or pay for services outside official channels, which drew the attention of financial experts assisting law enforcement. During one of Clara's interrogations, investigators confronted her with photographs of the warehouse. and the results of the blood analysis conducted on the tarp they had recovered. Clara attempted to maintain her composure, but it became apparent that her nerves were unraveling. She continued to assert that she had no knowledge of her husband's fate. Detectives decided to escalate the pressure, presenting her with additional evidence, even though a confession had not yet been secured. Meanwhile, efforts to identify Lobo Negro continued. Within days, investigators traced the account to a user on a popular forum on the dark web. This led them to Diego Pereira, a man with prior convictions for fraud and theft. He was known to law enforcement, although he had not been under close scrutiny for some time. This time, however, the trail led directly to him, and shortly afterward, Diego was taken into custody for questioning. During his initial interrogation, Diego refused to cooperate, but after several hours, he altered his approach. He confessed to communicating with Clara, but denied any involvement in her activities. However, his phone records and GPS data placed him near the abandoned warehouse on the day Alejandro disappeared. Investigators began developing a theory that Clara and Diego might have been collaborating to remove Alejandro for personal gain. At this point, they still lacked conclusive proof. Meanwhile, investigators revisited the matter of the gasoline containers discovered at the warehouse. Forensic experts identified fingerprints on the caps that matched Diego's, further connecting him to the scene. Despite this evidence, critical questions remained. Where was Alejandro now? And what had transpired after his last call to his wife? Police continued to gather evidence, gradually moving closer to the truth. Clara and Diego remained the primary suspects, but without a confession or a definitive witness, bringing the case to a close proved difficult. Investigators felt they were close, yet knew that a single misstep could jeopardize their chance of resolving the case. The investigation took a decisive turn when one of Diego Pereira's cellmates reported that Diego had boasted about his role in Alejandro's disappearance, suggesting that the situation had been handled through a carefully planned scheme. This tip prompted police to conduct a second search of the warehouse where blood traces had previously been found. Using more advanced equipment, investigators meticulously examined every corner and discovered a sealed-off room concealed behind an old brick wall. Upon breaking through, they uncovered a neglected space strewn with remnants of tarps, soaked in chemicals, empty containers, and shredded pieces of clothing. In one corner lay severely damaged organic remains. Forensic experts quickly identified them as human and soon confirmed that they belonged to Alejandro Gutierrez. The autopsy revealed that Alejandro had been dead for several weeks. These findings proved crucial in breaking the case. Detectives summoned Diego for another interrogation and offered a reduced sentence in exchange for full disclosure and cooperation. Diego agreed and revealed the details of the scheme he and Clara had planned months earlier. According to him, the plot began when Clara approached him, offering a substantial sum of money if he assisted her in dealing with her husband. Her goal was to gain access to Alejandro's bank accounts and to end a marriage she no longer considered advantageous. Clara had designed a scenario intended to resemble a kidnapping and subsequent disappearance in order to avoid arousing suspicion. On the day Alejandro disappeared, while he was driving back home from Cortiva, Clara set out to intercept him. She sent him a message in advance, asking for assistance and claiming that her car had broken down. Alejandro, being the attentive husband, immediately altered his route and drove to the location Clara had specified, a secluded spot near the warehouses. When he arrived, he saw Clara standing by her car with the hood raised. He exited his truck to offer help. But as he approached, Diego suddenly emerged from behind the vehicle. Armed with a metal bar, Diego struck Alejandro from behind, landing a blow to the back of his head. The force of the impact caused Alejandro to collapse, losing consciousness. Diego delivered several additional strikes to ensure he would not recover. And with Clara's assistance, they placed his body into the trunk of her car. They transported him to the warehouse they had prepared in advance. There, Diego and Clara restrained Alejandro to keep him immobilized. As he began to regain consciousness, Diego used a knife they had previously purchased, delivering several strikes to Alejandro's chest. The act was brutal and ruthless. They moved quickly, knowing they had to dispose of the body before it could tie them to the crime. Once it was clear Alejandro had passed, they wrapped his body in a tarp to contain the blood and began the process of covering their tracks. Initially, Diego and Clara planned to use chemicals to dissolve the remains. They had brought several containers of acid to the warehouse ahead of time, but the process proved more challenging than they anticipated, and they were unable to fully eliminate the body. Instead, they dismembered the remains, hiding them in various corners of the warehouse and covering them with debris and construction waste, hoping it would be sufficient to prevent discovery. Their original plan had been to remove all evidence, but realizing time was running out, they left things as they were, intending to return later for a more thorough cleanup. After finishing with Alejandro's body, Clara and Diego returned to his truck parked nearby. Diego took the driver's seat, while Clara sat in the passenger seat, aiming to avoid suspicion if anyone saw the truck on the road. They drove it to an isolated parking lot along a rarely used road. Along the way, they stopped at a gas station to inspect and clean the truck without attracting attention. A gas station attendant later recalled seeing the man driving with a woman in the passenger seat, matching Clara's description. This testimony would later become a critical piece of evidence in the investigation. When they arrived at the deserted parking lot, Diego left Alejandro's truck with its hazard lights on, giving the impression that the driver had merely stepped away. Before leaving the cab, they carefully wiped down the steering wheel, door handles, and other surfaces where fingerprints could remain, leaving Alejandro's personal items in place to create the illusion of a routine trip. After attending to these grim details, Clara returned home and assumed the role of a worried wife. She made calls to Alejandro, left messages, and the following day reported him missing to the police. Her behavior was intended to deflect suspicion, but detectives noticed inconsistencies in her statements. A review of her phone records revealed she had been texting with Diego on the day Alejandro disappeared. Surveillance cameras also captured her car traveling along a route she would not normally take. When confronted with this evidence, Clara denied any involvement, insisting that she was merely concerned for her husband and that her interaction with Diego had been coincidental. However, further analysis of financial records revealed substantial transfers from her accounts to anonymous bank accounts linked to Diego, which strengthened the case against her. During the trial, prosecutors presented a detailed timeline supported by witness testimony, surveillance footage, financial transactions, and Diego's confession. They demonstrated that Clara was the mastermind behind the plot that led to Alejandro's tragic death. She had devised the plan, financed it, and coordinated Diego's actions to stage Alejandro's disappearance. Diego executed her instructions, but his confession revealed the full details and clarified each person's role. In the courtroom, Alejandro's family and loved ones watched the defendants with expressions of anger and heartbreak. His mother, Maria, sat with her hands clenched, tears filling her eyes. She tried to look straight ahead, but her gaze kept faltering, as if unable to fully face the truth. Each time the prosecutor recounted what had happened to her son, her face contorted in uncontainable pain. Alejandro's sister, Rosa, could not suppress her sobs as the prosecutor described the plot orchestrated by Clara and Diego. The prosecution's words were heavy and harrowing. As the prosecutor detailed how Clara manipulated and schemed to eliminate her husband, the family's faces twisted in horror. They struggled to comprehend how a woman they had known could commit such a cold-blooded betrayal. Memories of Clara pretending to share in their grief haunted them, deepening their heartbreak. The court sentenced Clara Martinez to life in prison, without the possibility of parole for orchestrating the crime, conspiracy, and destruction of evidence. Diego Pereira, who cooperated with the investigation and provided testimony, received a 25-year sentence with potential reductions for good behavior. The judge emphasized that Diego's cooperation was crucial in exposing and holding the primary perpetrator accountable, though it did not absolve him of responsibility for his role in the crime. The tragic death of Alejandro Gutierrez shook Argentina, serving as a sobering reminder of the lengths some people will go to for financial gain and self-interest. The case made headlines nationwide, with townspeople discussing it long after the trial concluded. This dark story illustrated how quickly lives can unravel when greed and calculated malice override human decency. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the Hidden Cases files. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.